All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on something our source material calls the sovereign illusion, and it all boils down to one pretty unsettling question. Who really owns the room?
So I want you to imagine something. Picture this. You did it. You actually did it. You ran all the campaigns, you gave the speeches, you shook the hands, and you won. You are now the president, the prime minister, the leader of a country. And you didn't just win. You won on a platform of real change. Rebuilding infrastructure, fixing healthcare, making energy affordable, the big stuff. You've got the political capital, the people are behind you, you have the keys to the treasury. It feels like nothing can stop you, right? You're the one in charge.
But then the phone rings. And look, it's not some rival politician. It's not another world leader. No, the call is coming from a sleek glass tower, maybe in New York, maybe in London. And the voice on the other end of that line, it's about to completely flip your whole understanding of what power even is.
This moment. This is what our source material calls the president's phone call. It is the ultimate reality check. The voice on the phone, it's not yelling. It's calm, it's direct, and it basically lays out a threat. Go ahead, pass those laws you promised everyone. If you do, we'll slash your country's credit rating to junk. Your currency will tank, and that national debt you have, it's going to become completely unpayable. Good luck. And by the time you hang up that phone, the main idea of this whole explainer becomes terrifyingly clear. You, the person that people actually voted for, you aren't really in charge. You're just middle management, and you work for a company that's way, way bigger than your entire country. So, okay, if the president isn't calling the shots, who is? Well, our source points to what it calls a triumvirate of influence. Think of them as the three invisible architects of the global economy. And listen, these aren't some shadowy villains out of a spy movie. They're corporate, they're kind of beige, and they are unbelievably powerful. So this triumvirate, it's made up of three groups. First, you've got the asset managers. These are the folks who buy and sell a country's debt. Then you have the rating agencies. They're like the teachers grading a country's financial homework. And finally, the index providers, who decide who gets to be in the cool kids club of major investment funds. Let's dig into the first group, the asset managers.
Okay, get ready for this number, $20 trillion. Just let that sink in for a second. That's roughly how much money is managed by just three firms, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. It's a number so big, it's almost impossible to really wrap your head around.
So, to try and put that into perspective for you, the money managed by just those three companies is almost the same size as the entire economy of the United States, the entire U.S. GDP. It also means they're the biggest shareholders in pretty much every major company you can think of. Okay, so here's why that matters. Here's the crucial part. Every government on Earth needs to borrow money to function, right? They do that by selling debt. And who buys that debt? These are the firms. They're the biggest customers. So if they decide, you know what, we're not buying your debt anymore, or even worse, if they decide to sell off what they already have, they can effectively shut a country's government down. That is a financial veto, a veto that never ever appears on a ballot. And that brings us to how this all actually works. What are the tools they use? The source material has a great name for it, the math of submission. It really gets to the heart of it, because this isn't about opinions or politics. It's about cold, hard, unforgiving numbers.
And it all starts with something called the sovereign credit rating. This is the main job of the second group in our triumvirate, the rating agencies. You've probably heard of them, Moody's, S&P, Fitch. Now these are private for-profit companies, and their whole business is giving a report card grade to an entire country based on how likely it is to pay back its debt.
And yeah, it works pretty much exactly like a report card. If you get an AAA, you're a star student, a super safe bet for investors. But if your grade drops to BB or lower, you get slapped with junk status. That basically means borrowing money just became crazy expensive. And a C grade, forget about it. That's signaling a full-blown economic meltdown.
And you want to know the mindset here? This quote from S&P back when they downgraded the US in 2011, it just says everything. The message they sent to every politician in the world was crystal clear. We don't care about your social programs. We don't care about your promises to voters. The math doesn't care. All the math cares about is one thing. Do the creditors get their money back?
And what's wild is that a huge part of this system is totally automated. Take BlackRock, one of those big asset managers we talked about. They run this massive software platform called Aladdin. People have called it the central nervous system of global finance. It's basically an algorithm that's constantly monitoring trillions of dollars in assets, pricing risk in real time. It takes all the mess of human emotion right out of the equation.
And that brings us to the third and final group, the index providers. Think of companies like MSCI as the ultimate gatekeepers. They're the ones who decide which countries get to be called developed markets versus emerging markets. And this is a huge deal, because if they decide to kick a country out of a major index, it can trigger an economic earthquake. Billions of dollars in automated investment, pension funds, you name it, can get pulled out of that country's economy, like literally overnight.
So you might be asking, what does all this actually mean in the real world? What's the consequence? The source has a perfect term for it, the global straitjacket. It's this idea that all these financial forces basically lock governments into a really, really narrow set of choices.
And this is where we come full circle, right back to that core idea, the sovereign illusion. It's the belief that most of us have that our elected leaders are, well, sovereign, that they have the final say. But the reality, as we're seeing, is that their power is seriously hemmed in by this giant external financial machine.
And here's what that straitjacket looks like in practice. Let's say a politician promises to rebuild the country's infrastructure. Boom. The rating agencies threaten to downgrade their debt, making the whole thing impossible. Or what if they promise to protect local businesses? Bam! The index providers could delist their market, and all that money we talked about just vanishes. Every single time, the campaign promise slams right into the wall of financial reality. So what's the end result? You end up with a world where countries that are totally different cultures, different needs, all start to have the exact same economic policies. It creates this kind of global monoculture. And it's a system designed first and foremost for the convenience of the people lending the money, the creditors, not necessarily for the actual citizens living in those countries. Which brings us to the last piece of this puzzle. And honestly, it might be the most important one. It's what the source calls the accountability gap. I mean, if these private companies have this much power, who exactly is holding them accountable?
I mean, think about it. This is the heart of the matter. In a democracy, if your government messes up, you have a solution. You can vote them out of office. But what happens if a bad call by BlackRock or Moody's triggers an economic crisis? What's your recourse then? Who do you complain to? You can't exactly vote out their board of directors, can you?
The conclusion from our source material is pretty stark. This whole system is fundamentally changing how we relate to our own countries. We're slowly shifting from being citizens of a nation to just being data points in some giant global risk management software. And that's a really chilling thought.
So we're going to end with this one final question to leave you with. As our history is written less by ballots and more by the fine print on bond agreements, what's the real cost? If the whole system is really just designed to serve the numbers on a ledger, what happens to all the people and all their needs and their stories that just don't fit neatly on the page?